Hi everyone. In this video we're going to take a look at some processes you can use for coloring your line work in Photoshop without using a drawing tablet. A lot of students, especially starting out in this unit, don't necessarily have access to a drawing tablet all the time, especially if you're working at home. And so it can be a little bit difficult to use a mouse to color your line work in sometimes. So I'm going to show you a process in this video which can make it potentially a little bit easier to do. Now I'm using the same file as the last video that we produced, which was looking at just a basic file organization and also the basic paintbrush tool in Photoshop. And this time what we're going to be doing is using the wand selection tool and the fill option. Now we can also use the paint bucket tool as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by making a new layer, and what I'll be doing is filling in some of this green material on the character, so the hat and the collar and the pants. Okay, so I'm going to make a new layer inside my my front view here. So I'll just hit the new layer button. I'm going to rename this, and I'm going to call this green fill, because we're going to use green. And I'm going to come across and I'm going to select my green color from my original artwork. Now last time what we did was we had the brush tool active like it is here, and I held down the Alt key like this. What I'm going to do this time is I'm going to just select the eyedropper tool, which is basically what that one is. So the eyedropper is just a couple of icons above the paintbrush, and you can see there that the shortcut is I on the keyboard, like that. So when you've got that active, basically all you know, you've just got your eyedropper. So I'm just going to come up and select my green. Now we've got shadow colors on here, and we also have some highlights on the skin. I'm making sure that I'm selecting sort of the mid-tone green and not the shadow color green, so it's probably easier to select it from here. So we'll just grab that. Okay, so I'm going to come back over to my artwork, and what we're going to do is use the magic wand tool, or the wand selection tool, to select an area to fill. So if I come up to this icon just here, you can see that we've got the magic wand tool just here. Now there's a couple of other selection options here which are newer, but this is sort of the older version, or the classic way of doing it. So depending on the software you're using, there's probably an option similar to this one if you're using something a bit different other than Photoshop. So I'm going to grab the wand selection tool, and we've got a few options at the top here that we need to take a look at. The first one that we need to be aware of is sample all layers, and you can see here at the moment that it's turned off. What that means is when I click, it's going to select part of the image that I click on, but it's going to ignore any of the other layers. So in that case, what it's going to do is only read pixels that are on the green fill layer that I've got. Now that's a new layer, so there's nothing in there, which means if I click, it'll just select the entire image, or the entire layer. And you can see that there, these little dotted lines here, which are indicating the selection, are going right around the edge of the document. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to be able to fill on our green fill layer, but we need to be able to select line work or areas inside the line work that are actually on our outline layer. So I'm just going to deselect the selection I made. So I'll go to select, deselect, which is Command or Control D. Okay, and that's gotten rid of the selection that we had. And I'm going to click Sample All Layers just there. So what that's going to do now is it's going to read my outline layer and allow me to select based on the line work while remaining on the green fill layer, so I can then just quickly add the color in on my fill layer. Now, one of the issues with using this option is I need to make sure I don't have anything else visible. You can see I've still got my rough line work underneath. If I do selections with this option active, it's going to also read those rough lines. So I need to turn my rough sketch off for this. All I've got is my line work and my color. Okay, so what we're going to do is make sure we're on our fill layer. I've got my green color selected, and I'm going to click inside the area I want to fill. And you can see it's basically selecting just inside the line work. Now, one of the things with your line work is sometimes it doesn't have a very super hard edge on it. Sometimes it's got what we call anti-aliasing, which are these little, you can kind of see it here, it's got these little grey pixels, and this is to make the line work look a little softer and less stepped. So sometimes there's actually this tolerance value here dictates how many of those grey squares or grey pixels the selection will include. And you can see roughly here on this row of pixels, it's selected this half of them where they're sort of more towards the white end of the spectrum because I clicked in this sort of white area. But there's other pixels here which are not quite black, they're grey. So the issue here is when I fill this, it's going to leave what looks like little kind of grey or white kind of artifacts around in between the colour and the line. So what I want to do is expand this selection out a few pixels so that it also includes those almost black areas of the line work as well. Don't forget we're colouring under the line. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up to Select, I'm going to come down to Modify, and I'm going to select Expand. What I want to do is expand the selection out underneath the line work a little bit. So Modify, Expand, and I can expand probably 2 pixels would be okay. So I'll type in 2, and I'll hit OK. And you can see it's expanded that selection now inside the line work. Now all I need to do is fill my color in. So I've got a couple of options. I can either switch over to the paint bucket and then click, and it will fill that area in. And just to show that it's filled right up to the edge of the selection, in this case it probably won't have done, and there's a reason for that. I'll show you in a second. If I turn the line work off, you can see that it didn't fill right to the edge of the selection, and that's because the paint bucket has its own all layers option, right? So what I would have to do is turn that off for the paint bucket. So I'm just going to undo and undo again to get rid of the fill. If I turn off all layers on the paint bucket tool and then I fill, turn off the line work for a second, you can see that's gone right to the edge of the fill selection. Okay, so that's one option. The way that I do it is a little bit different, and this is so that you don't have to keep switching between the wand tool and the paint bucket. So I'm going to do another area. I'm going to do this area down here. So I've switched back to my magic wand with the W keyboard shortcut. I'm going to, still on my green fill, I'm going to select the brim of the hat. I'm going to come back up to Select, Modify, Expand. It remembers that I did 2 pixels last time, so I'll just hit OK. So it expands it. And this time what I'm going to do, instead of switching to the paint bucket, I'm going to hold down Alt and hit the backspace key on the keyboard. What that does is it fills the whole selection in with the foreground color. And what it's doing is reading that selection instead of the actual line work. So if I turn off the outline layer again, you can see that's filled right to the edge. So that means I don't have to switch to the paint bucket, and I don't have to make sure that the paint bucket's all layers are switched off. All I have to do is tap with the wand, expand the selection, and then just hit Alt backspace, and it will fill the color in for me. And it'll do it accurately to that selection every time. Now, it can get a little bit tedious to have to come back up here every time to the select menu and come down to modify and then go expand. There's a lot of clicking in that menu. We can automate those types of processes, and so what I may do is add some reference into that or a reference about that into a new video, a separate video called Actions. So I can show you how to set up a semi-automated process for going into that menu, and it'll work off another keyboard shortcut. So really all you'd have to do is hit a keyboard shortcut to get it to expand, and then hit your keyboard shortcut to fill. But I'll add that in as a separate video for those of you that might be interested in that. So I'm going to leave this video here, and I'll see you again soon.